May 13th, 1998. Do you remember when telephones sat on nightstands? Heavy, corded things that connected you to the world? Frank Sinatra sat in his bedroom in Beverly Hills, holding the receiver. His hand, the hand that held microphones in front of millions, trembled as he dialed a number he'd memorized 50 years AGO that IT rang once. Twice. 3 times that he knew nobody would answer. Ava Gardner had been dead for 8 years, but he called anyway, because it was May 13th, would have been her 76th birthday. And Frank Sinatra had called Ava Gardner on her birthday every single year since 1946, even when they hated each other, even when she wouldn't speak to him, even after she died on the 4th ring, an automated voice. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Frank hung up, stared at the phone, and whispered to the empty room, "Happy birthday, Angel. I still can't stop loving you." Nobody in that house knew this would be Frank's last night alive, or that he'd spent it calling a ghost point 1946. Do you remember when Hollywood was glamorous? When stars dressed in tuxedos and gowns just to go to dinner? Frank Sinatra was at the peak of his Bobby Soxer fame. Girls screamed when he sang. They fainted in the aisles. He was married to Nancy, his childhood sweetheart. Had 2 kids, another on the way. Life was perfect. Then he met Ava Gardner at a party. Remember Ava? Dark hair, green eyes, the most beautiful woman who ever lived, according to everyone who saw her. She was 23 years old, newly divorced from Mickey Rooney. Didn't care about fame or money or playing nice for the cameras. Frank saw her across the room and later said, "It was like being struck by lightning. I looked at her and forgot I was married, forgot everything except her." They talked for 3 hours that night, about music, about loneliness, about being famous but feeling invisible. At the end, Frank asked for her number. Ava laughed. "You're married, Francis." "I know, but can I call you anyway?" She gave him the number, handwritten on a cocktail napkin. Remember when that's how you got phone numbers? Paper napkins and lipstick and hope? Frank kept that napkin in his wallet until the day he died. But here's what made their love story so destructive. Neither one knew how to love without destroying point 1949 to 1953. The affair became public. Newspapers called it scandalous. The church condemned it. Nancy filed for divorce. Frank's career collapsed. Nobody wanted to hire the man who'd abandoned his wife and children for another woman. But Frank didn't care. He'd found something he'd been searching for his whole life. A woman who matched his passion, his rage, his impossible standards. Ava was the same. She'd married Mickey Rooney because he was charming. It lasted a year. She'd dated Howard Hughes because he was rich. It lasted weeks. But Frank was different. Frank understood her. They fought constantly. Do you remember when couples fought loud? When neighbors heard dishes breaking and doors slamming? Frank and Ava fought about everything. His jealousy, her independence, his career, her drinking, his control, her freedom. One night in their Palm Springs house, they had a fight so bad the police were called. Frank had accused Ava of flirting with a photographer. She'd thrown a lamp. He'd punched a wall. She'd packed her bags. "I'm leaving, Frank. I can't do this anymore." "You can't leave me, Ava. You're the only woman I've ever really loved." "Then why do you treat me like property instead of a person?" Frank had no answer, so Ava left. For 3 days, then she came back, because she loved him too. Loved him so much it hurt. Loved him so much it scared her. They got married November 7th, 1951. Remember when weddings were small? Theirs was at a friend's house in Philadelphia. Ava wore a mauve cocktail dress. Frank wore a suit. They said their vows and both cried. The marriage lasted 2 years. Legally, 6. But emotionally, it never ended. And here's the moment that destroyed them both forever. Point 1953. Ava was pregnant. She'd gotten the role in Magambo, filming in Africa. Her career was exploding. Frank's was dying. His record label had dropped him. Movie studios wouldn't hire him. He was broke. Ava had to choose, have the baby and lose the role, or terminate the pregnancy and save her career. Frank begged her to keep it. "Ava, this is our baby. Our second chance. We can make it work." "How, Frank? You're broke. I'm the one working I'm the one supporting us both. And you hate it. You hate that I'm more successful right now." "That's not true. It is true. You want me barefoot and pregnant while you're the big star. But that's not who I am." She terminated the pregnancy. Went to Africa to film. Frank stayed in America, devastated. The marriage was over. Not officially. They wouldn't divorce until 1957. But the moment Ava made that choice, something between them shattered. Years later, Ava would say it was the biggest regret of her life. I killed the only part of Frank I could have kept forever. Frank never spoke about it publicly, but friends said he never forgave her, and never forgave himself for putting her in that position. But here's what nobody understood. They never stopped calling each other point 1957 through 1990. Divorced but never separate. Do you remember when long-distance calls were expensive? When you watched the clock, because every minute cost money. Frank didn't care. He'd call Ava from wherever he was, New York, Vegas, London, Tokyo, just to hear her voice. Sometimes she'd answer. Sometimes she wouldn't. When she did, they'd talk for hours. About nothing. About everything. About the life they could have had. Do you ever think about us, Ava? Every day, Francis. Every single day. Why can't we make it work? Because we're both too damaged, too proud, too afraid of needing someone more than they need us. Frank married twice more. Barbara, who he stayed with until he died. But everyone knew, including Barbara, that Ava was the one, the love of his life, the one who got away, the one he never stopped mourning. Ava never remarried, had affairs, dated movie stars and bullfighters and billionaires. But none of them were Frank. None of them understood her the way he did. Do you remember when love was complicated? When it wasn't just happiness and Instagram posts, but actual, painful, destructive, beautiful chaos. And then came January 25th, 1990, that Ava Gardner died in London. She was 67 years old. Pneumonia complicated by emphysema from decades of smoking. She died alone in her apartment. No husband, no children, just memories and regrets. When Frank heard the news, he was performing in Vegas. He was 74 years old. Still singing, still performing, still Frank Sinatra. His assistant told him between shows. Frank nodded, finished his performance, sang every song perfectly, then went to his dressing room and locked the door. Security heard him sobbing, heard him saying her name over and over. Ava, my angel. He canceled the rest of his Vegas run, flew home to California, didn't attend her funeral, couldn't face it, could have watched them put her in the ground and pretend she was gone. For weeks, he barely spoke. Barbara tried to comfort him. Frank, I know you love her. I understand. You don't understand. Nobody does. She was the only woman who ever made me feel like I wasn't enough, and the only woman who ever made me want to be enough. Without her, I'm just an old man singing old songs. But here's what kept Frank alive for 8 more years. He never stopped talking to her point 1990 through 1998. Every night before bed, Frank would call Ava's old number. Knew it was disconnected. Knew nobody would answer, but he'd dial anyway. Listen to the rings or the automated message. Then hang up and say, "Good night, Angel. I love you." His family thought he was losing his mind. "Dad, she's gone. You have to let her go." "I can't. Don't you understand? She's the only thing I've never been able to let go of. Not fame, not money, not even my voice. But Ava is permanent." He kept her picture on his nightstand. The one from 1951, their wedding day. Young, beautiful, hopeful. Before everything fell apart, he'd talk to the picture sometimes. Tell her about his day, about songs he was recording, about memories that made him laugh or cry or both. "Remember that night in Palm Springs, Ava? When we danced to I've Got You Under My Skin at 3 a.m. You said, 'Francis, this song is about us.' And you were right. I've had you under my skin for 50 years. You're in my blood, in my bones, in every note I ever sang. Do you understand what that kind of love looks like? Not movie love, not romance novel love, but real, messy, impossible, unending love that survives death and time and every reason should die." And then came May 13th, 1998, his last night alive. Frank was 82 years old. His health was failing. Heart problems. Dementia starting. He couldn't perform anymore. Could barely walk without help. But he could still dial a phone. May 13th would have been Ava's 76th birthday. Frank sat in his bedroom, the same room where he'd spent countless nights calling her over the decades. Barbara was downstairs. Nurses were nearby. But Frank was alone with his memories, and a telephone, he dialed the number. His fingers remembered it even when his mind forgot other things. It rang. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. He hung up, tried again. Same message. Third time. Still nothing. That he put the receiver down. stared at Ava's wedding photo, and started talking to her like she was there. Angel, I don't have much time left. Doctors don't say it, but I know. And I needed to tell you something before I go. I'm sorry for everything, for being jealous, for being controlling, for not being the man you needed me to be. You deserve better than me. But God help me, I loved you better than I've ever loved anything. He closed his eyes, tears running down his weathered face. I wrote my way, and everyone thinks it's about my career, but it was about you, Ava. Everything was always about you. I did it my way, and my way was loving you even when you hated me, even when you were gone, even now. He fell asleep holding the phone. The next morning, May 14th, Frank Sinatra died. Heart attack. Quick. Peaceful. They found him in his bed, one hand on his chest, the other holding the telephone. On his nightstand, Ava's wedding photo, and a piece of paper with her phone number written in his shaky handwriting. Aid to his funeral. They played One for My Baby and One More for the Road. The song Frank always sang when he was drunk and missing Ava. The song that was basically his and Ava's relationship in 3 minutes. It's 2:45. There's no one in the place except you and me. So set him up, Joe. I got a little story you ought to know. In his will, Frank left instructions. Bury me with the cocktail napkin. The one from 1946, with Ava's number. The one he'd carried for 52 years. They did. Frank Sinatra went into the ground with Ava Gardner's phone number in his pocket. But here's where the story becomes eternal. 26 years later, people still talk about Frank and Ava. Not Frank and Nancy. Not Frank and Barbara. Frank and Ava. The impossible love. The one that destroyed them both, and neither could survive without you remember when love meant something permanent? When the one wasn't just the person you married, but the person who marked your soul forever. Young people don't understand Frank and Ava. They say, why didn't they just make it work? Why did they fight so much? Why couldn't they let go? But if you're old enough to have loved and lost, to have met someone who changed you so completely you never fully recovered, to have spent years calling a number that won't answer, then you understand perfectly. Frank Sinatra was one of the greatest entertainers who ever lived. He sang for presidents and kings. He made millions cry and dance and fall in love. He did it his way, but his way was lonely because the only woman who ever really mattered died 8 years before he did. And he spent those 8 years calling her number, talking to her picture. Loving a ghost, that's not pathetic. That's devotion. That's the kind of love that transcends death and reason and everything practical. And the echo? It never stopped. Today, there's a booth at Patsy's restaurant in New York, Frank's favorite spot, table 14. They keep it reserved with a small plaque, Frank and Ava's table. Couples sit there and wonder about the love story that couldn't work but couldn't end. They order drinks. They toast to impossible love. They understand, somehow, that some people only get one great love in their entire life. And if you're lucky enough to find it, you never let go, even when it kills you, even when they're gone. Somewhere tonight, someone is calling a number they know won't answer, saying, I love you, to a person who can't respond, holding on to a memory that hurts too much to forget. That's Frank's echo. That's Ava's ghost. That's the price and privilege of loving someone so deeply they become part of your soul. You remember Frank Sinatra? The voice, the swagger, my way. New York, New York, the Rat Pack, the legend. But also remember, he died calling a dead woman's phone number. He died with her picture on his nightstand. He died never having recovered from losing her 44 years earlier. That's not a cautionary tale. That's a love story. The realest kind. The kind that doesn't end with happily ever after, but with, I loved you until my last breath and I'd do it all again. The phone rang 3 times. Nobody answered, but Frank kept calling. That's the echo. Forever.